evening. I'd like to read the notice for tonight's meeting. Town of Guilford will hold a special meeting at the town board at 7 p.m. on Wednesday, May 29th at the Guilford Town Hall, located at 223 Marble Road, Guilford Center, for purpose of reviewing a draft of renewable energy law. The agenda is on the side table. We have a couple other small items to take care of. I really have to ask people not to talk at all because our tape recorder does not clearly pick up what's being said when we have background noise. At this time, I'd like to call the special meeting of the Guilford Town Board to order and ask Councilmember Ives to lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, first item of business I have on the agenda is a resolution I'll need from the town board to create 2 seasonal highway positions for extra hire for the summer. Motion has been made by Councilmember Terry Ives. Motion seconded by Councilmember Terry Ives, or Tom Ives. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That's going to carry. Okay, at this time, we'll be reviewing the last draft that has been sent out to the board of a renewable energy law for the town of Guilford. Brady, I guess I'm going to kind of turn the floor over to you and let you take us through some of the more recent changes that have been made. And if board members have questions, please speak up.
Okay, so you have your changes should be in a different color, hopefully in your version.
Excuse me, point of order, we need to hear also, so please speak as loud as you can.
Okay.
The public, even though we're not speaking, but we need to hear what's going on.
Some of the changes are formatting, clarifying, cleaning up some things. Other ones are based on the conversations that were had last meeting. So I just want to point that out. So at the beginning, on page 1, just an organizational type of thing here. I moved some of the regulation language or some of the reasons why this law is being adopted from that last paragraph up to the bullet points above it. And I also realized that there's a section 2, should be section 3, the authority right there. I'll fix that. But that's really only the difference there. Nothing's really changed substantively in section 2. I just moved it to be better organized there. Same thing on page 2. Some of the sections have changed, so I just updated that the decommissioning plan and the definition there. Corrected as cross-reference to a different section. Okay, page 3. So if you remember, there was a definition later on in this agreement for sensitive sites. I moved that definition to the actual definition section and also addressed some of the definitional concerns that had come up last time. So if you want to see what it used to look like, it was on page 4. You can see what was there before, and basically the new definition is there on page 3.
Okay, and I'll note you added some additional sensitive sites that were suggested.
Yes. Yes. So most of the ones in number 3 are new sensitive sites that were brought up last meeting. And forgive me if I called something by not its correct technical name. Please point that out to me. I mean, you guys are more familiar with these names than I am. So, and if there's anything I missed, please let me know. If there's any other sensitive sites that you guys thought of or that were brought up, let me know.
Where's the Jewel House?
It's on Furnace Hill. Do you know where Beach Road goes off? Do you know where Tom Gray lives?
Yeah.
Just past there.
Okay.
It's one of the oldest residences in the town.
Total height is a new definition I added. This is, again, that's something we discussed last meeting, but just something that needed to be defined better.
Where is that?
Right under sensitive site, right there. So later on in the agreement, we reference the height of towers, and we call it by the height to the tip blade, So we just use a term here called total height, which is the height of the tower to the furthest vertical extension of the WECS. So that would be the tip blade when the blade is standing, when it turns, and so it's standing straight up. And I just reordered the definitions there so they're in alphabetical order for so one of the definitions moved. Bottom of page 3, that authority section was really duplicative of the authority section that was earlier on, so I just removed it. I tried to clean some of this up here. This next section, page 3 to 4, is the first part is for non-commercial wind. Okay, these were some of the changes that were discussed last meeting. Rather than characterize it in 50%, the height of the tower plus 50%, we characterize it as 1.5 times the total height using that new definition for this is for non-commercial wind towers. And just some other cleanup here, really nothing important.
Where do we have the definition of when it might wander away from being non-commercial and becoming commercial?
Right in the,
Is that-
yeah, page 2, I'm sorry, page 3. Wind energy conversion
Oh,
systems.
110%.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So if the purpose is to use it on site and you're not going to produce more than 110% of your own need,
Right.
then it's non-commercial.
Very good.
Yeah, and also there's a, right, yes. So it's a relatively low standard
Right.
for non-commercial. Okay, so section 3, starting on page 4, is the section on commercial wind, okay? Some of this is just cleanup. Just clarifying in section 3A that once an applicant were to receive a WECS permit, it's now permitted within the town. You don't have zoning here, so I'm using language that's not zoning language, but somewhat similar. Okay, you get your WECS permit, and now you're permitted within the town. I also clarified there that you, as a town board, if you're going to grant a permit, you could. You really have 3 options. You could grant an application, you could deny an application, or you could grant it with conditions. So you could say, yes, we're going to grant you a permit as long as you do X, Y, Z. Okay. And again, just for everybody, so everybody's on the same page, this is not a permit that Highbridge Wind is applying for right now. They're so big that they're going to New York State. So this is really what it would apply if somebody was below the threshold for New York State, but above the threshold for non-commercial. So that would be when you're actually giving out a permit. Page 5. So in section 4, starting on page 5, are a list of requirements for the application. Just so you understand what we're listing here. These are a list of requirements for an application for a WCS permit. Okay. So one of the application requirements is they have to present a visual impact study. This is something that wasn't clearly listed before. I mean, it was described, but not in as much detail as it is now. So you can read that for yourselves.
On I, the bottom,
Yes.
that second line, that should be form there, shouldn't it? It says visual
Nope.
impacts form.
Good catch. Should be from.
Okay.
From.
So you'll see that it requires a kind of a higher level here of a visual impact study. And this is consistent with what New York State requires as well, where you're not just assessing the visual impact from one spot or at one time of year under one set of conditions. You have to assess it from, whether it's in the winter when there's no trees on or leaves on the trees. You assess it different vantage points around the whole town. So that's what this is seeking to do here. If anybody has any questions as we go through, let me I'll just jump in here, so otherwise I'll keep going through the changes. Just clean up on the rest of this page. Page 7, there used to be a paragraph B there that allowed the applicant to ask the board to waive certain requirements. We talked about removing that. There really wouldn't be a scenario where I think the board should be waiving these provisions, and I think we discussed that, which wouldn't be something the board would do anyway. So we just invite applications to waive requirements. In the new paragraph B, I was concerned about the scale that it was in this law. It doesn't necessarily, at least my thought on this was shouldn't necessarily be that scale. As long as it's plotted to scale and readable, they can use whatever actual scaling they want to use. That was the reason for that change.
On line 7,
Yes.
I know this is probably nitpicky, but it says number 6 in the landscape plan. On the second line, you have a comma here between garden and center. I think that should be there.
I'm done.
Yeah. Yep, good catch.
Yeah.
You're good tonight.
She is.
I'm gonna send all my editing to you.
So publish your stating the teacher grading papers.
All right, page 8. Number 7 on the top of page 8 was requiring them to have a lighting plan. So I added more detail on this based on some discussions we had. On a project where the towers are tall enough, in most cases the FAA is going to basically dictate the type of lighting that has to happen. So this is referencing FAA requirements.
Yeah, I had a question on it myself because if those are FAA lighting requirements, or can't we go below that, can we?
Right, but it's possible they may want to light it more than what FAA is requiring. So I think the idea is you would want them to light it more than they really needed to because that's going to affect visual impact.
Well, the way it's worded says using nighttime and overcast daytime conditions, stroboscopic lighting to satisfy FAA lighting requirements shall be subject to board's review. That sounds like we're going to say yea or nay whether they can use FAA lighting requirements, and that we can't do that.
So that's a good point. And again, this is not an area of expertise, but I think the issue there is that FAA may tell them that they need to light in a certain way, and then they have options in a way as to how they can do that. So if they can avoid using stroboscopic lighting, which is basically blinking,
Yes.
if they can avoid that and still meet the requirements, this is saying that would be the board's preference or subject to the board's review. If they had an option, to use certain lighting, that would be subject to board review. I think that was the intent here.
Okay. Just doesn't, sound like that.
I can take a look to see if there's a better way to
Yeah,
word
it
that.
just sounds like we're trying to make the final say on something that's federal regulations. I don't think we're
Yeah. And then it goes on to say the last line there that other than wind towers, no operational buildings or structures shall be artificially lit at nighttime except to the minimum extent necessary for operations or security. So again, to minimize impacts of light nuisance to.
Now, do we want to make sure they have downlighting on that rather than?
Yeah, you could specifically, I think, say that here.
Because we don't want to be lighting up the whole environment. If they're lighting up a doorway or something like that, it should be.
Is that the right term for that, downlighting?
I would think downlighting would cover it because.
I think that's what they call it.
more vertical than this.
We can check on the wording on that.
Okay. Okay, paragraph W requires them to submit a complaint resolution plan as part of their application. That requires an independent mediator or arbitrator to help resolve complaints from the public, and that's the requirement. And you'll see that this is an application requirement, and then later on in the design standards or the standards that they actually have to comply with, it references this again. It says you have to maintain a complaint resolution plan and resolve complaints as best as, or what's the word we use? Make every reasonable effort to resolve any complaint. The next paragraph requires a report detailing potential impacts of ice throw and leg throw on structures and property within the town, including safety measures to mitigate such impacts. So again, this is the study and data portion of it, providing some information on what impacts there might be due to ice throw. And then you'll see later on, there's a requirement that they use whatever available technology there is to minimize ice throw. As my understanding, there's always developing technology on this for, they can detect whether there's ice and shut down automatically. So that corresponds with the application requirement that they assess the impact.
Do we require them to report actual ice throwing that occurs and they're aware of it?
It doesn't say that, no.
Maybe
That would
they
be
should-
after, you're saying after construction, after they've already,
It should be a commitment that they make when they bring the project in.
yeah, it's like,
I would think so too, that if something's happening, we should know about it.
yeah. When we get to that section, remind me, I'll make a note of that, that's a good point. A noise analysis shall be prepared. Shall document noise levels at the exterior wall of the nearest residential structure located at a participating property. The noise analysis shall provide pre-existing ambient noise levels and include low-frequency noise. So, again, didn't specifically require them to present a noise study as part of their application, and now says that. The next one includes a shadow flicker study. Give you a minute to read that. All of these, again, correspond later on in this law correspond with actual requirements for the law. This is the application, like you have to study it, show us the results, and then later comply with certain standards when you build it. All right. So this next section are the standards for design. So this is what they have to stick to when they actually design the project. This is what the actual construction has to look like. First change is on page 9. I took the sound requirements out of this section and moved it to a different section. So you'll see as we go on, there's a new section for sound. So that's why that's deleted there. At the bottom of page 9, this is where they're required to have a complaint resolution plan and post it on their website and provide to any resident upon request. This is the ice throw section right here. So number 9 on the bottom of page 9.
That's number 7, you need to get rid of the housing there, that's not necessary.
Yep.
Sorry, yeah, on screen.
So what I'll add, and then if you're all in agreement, in 9, I'll add that the applicant will periodically provide reports of any ice throw incidents to the board.
What do we expect periodic to be though?
Oh,
I think we need to define that specifically.
not in the summer when they don't have it.
You never know around here.
You want it, you want it
Quarterly at least,
quarterly. Or other business.
or as it occurs.
Or once they become aware of it.
Right.
They might have this.
On any incident then.
Okay. So the design standard for shadow flicker simply says no non-participant shall be subjected to more than 30 hours of shadow flicker annually. So they have to provide the study up front, and then that's the design standard. And I pulled that from other requirements from other projects that have been approved and being considered right now. So that seems to be the
Top of page 10.
standard. We had a discussion last time about creating a standard for shadow flicker.
Right.
The next paragraph is the new sound section. It says the level of noise produced from the WCS shall not, and then we have a couple different sections here. This has been pulled after some discussions with everybody. It's pulled from conditions from the Casadega project that was approved, and these are conditions that were attached to that project. So it's the most recent project that was approved. And these are the standards that were attached to that project by the siting board, as I understand it. George, do you want to go through, do you want me to call out any of the comments that we received on this, or do you want to wait on that?
I'd wait on that.
Okay. So setbacks is the next section. Some of this is just cleanup. So again, I was just using consistent terminology here. We're using the term total height now, okay? And rather than 1.25x, we're saying 1.25 times. So these are the setbacks.
On number 2 on roadways, we have different roadways here. Are we going from the shoulder, the edge of the road, the center line?
Yeah, and that's a good point. So we really should clarify that it needs to be it probably should be the center line.
Doesn't it say the right of way?
It says
Would
from
be
the right
Right
of
away,
Yeah, the side of the road.
the edge of the right of way.
Oh, right.
However, at the town, we have never officially adopted the standard for road widths. It used to be Donovan specs, which was 19.99 feet off of center line, and we currently operate under Cornell Rural Roads. But despite some recommendations, the board never adopted those standards, and that's 25 feet. And that's pretty much what we do today, but it's never been official.
It's an area of ambiguity.
And then when we get into county roads and state roads and stuff, it's once again very different.
So maybe you better use the center instead of right.
That would be my recommendation. You're not really losing much, if you're going from the width of the middle of the road that's 25 feet versus the edge of it, you're only losing a little bit there. But at least you're sure where the boundary is, because the center is the center. With roads that have been acquired over time, they haven't been deeded to the town, there's no defined right-of-way for the edge.
And that's
where you're
most
talking
of our
about.
roads. However, we do have a few that have been deeded that were portions of state highway, portions of county highway.
Let's go with the center of the road,
Okay.
and that way it's defined.
And at times, I will say, what's deeded, which is rare in our case, the roads have been moved, and not necessarily all of those pieces have been cleaned up. You find examples where the county or the town owns a piece of road that we didn't know we owned, or a piece of property that we didn't know we owned.
So a couple of things I want to point out here that we may want to clarify. So in 4, it says 1.5 times total height or more from any non-participant commercial, retail, or industrial structure. Structure is not defined here. It could be, if we don't define it, it could be interpreted as broadly as being like, they have a fence out on the perimeter of the property. Is that part of a commercial structure? Or are we really talking about, occupied buildings here? Obviously, that's a big difference if you're just going with any sort of structure. In zoning terms, usually structure is interpreted to be very broad, like, it could be a doghouse or a shed or, anything like that. So,
Could you say a public access structure?
It could be private access, but it's a structure that's potentially
Well,
occupied
this is
by.
industrial.
Yeah, that's true.
Industrial, public,
They
publicly
still have
accessed.
industrial things
Well,
that the public can't access.
right.
But storage areas or things like that.
But it would still be a structure.
Well, even if you had a storage unit, public can certainly go in those. They're not gonna be in them probably often, but it's,
It would take out
any
fences.
suggestions on how we might
Well,
define that wording a little bit more specifically?
Now, the one before that, the number 3, we use the word residence,
Well-
so that doesn't include a garage or a shed.
and that's
where
my,
you reside.
right, and that's kind of my thinking here. If you're sticking with residents for when you're talking about property owners that aren't commercial, why would you extend that out? Why would you extend it out to non-occupied structures for commercial?
Well, because one is 1.5 and one is 2.0. That may make a difference in people's minds.
True.
I mean, you could mention, these are buildings that public can access or would be occupied in some way. So it's not just some structure that doesn't use it, or just something that's sitting
It'd be like,
Or-
It would be a barn, dairy barn, or,
there,
a
big fence or something.
chicken coop or something. That's a structure, and it's in commercial use.
okay. So I could try to think of a definition that would incorporate, basically any sort of, without using the word structure, again.
I wouldn't really be looking at a fence, we have a lot of fences
Right,
in the town.
fences would not
But the idea here is, and I guess the intent here is to protect human health, right, and animal, like you got animals, right,
Right.
farm animals. So you're not really concerned about something that's not going to injure people.
Structure with 4 walls.
No, there must be.
Much of a structure. Right, then they have 4 walls.
You got a three-wall barn.
Yeah.
Well, we'll have to, I think, keep it as building.
Building might be, it's still a little loose, but it's better. It's not,
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not going to do that structure.
Yeah, building might-
Industrial building.
Yeah, well, we can start there and
okay.
I think we probably have the same sort of issue in 5. And once again, where we're talking about sensitive sites, is it to the
Yeah.
historic structure, building?
Yeah, the way this is written right now, I would interpret it to mean boundary line, I think.
Right,
The sensitive
right.
site is defined as any parcel that has on it any of those things. So I would interpret that to mean boundary line. So that could be, if you have a huge piece of property, it's 100 acres, and in the middle of it is one of these sensitive, that
Your
pond or
sensitive
whatever.
site.
You've now, basically the setback from that pond is more than, it's a lot. It's a lot more than what I think you're intending, so. I guess that's the question to you. If you want to keep it boundary line, you keep it as is. If you want to make it clear that it's the outer edge of whatever it is we're talking about.
Well, with everything else, we've looked at structures, residential structures.
There is a difference here that with sensitive sites, if you're going to, let me just use an example. So let's say we're dealing with
Guilford Lake.
Guilford
The
Lake, which
river.
may have campground, I don't know, does it have campgrounds around it or like areas of parks? Like how do you,
There's a swimming area.
so if you just use the water's edge, you're gonna lose if there's a park area,
Yeah.
So, or if,
And what happens for rivers and things that change course, because we've listed the rivers and they meander and rivers, what's the boundary? It's the edge of the river. However, if you have fishing access, it goes, it would be the middle of the river.
I mean, you could say it's the edge of whatever it is at the time they receive approval, and then if it moves, it's not gonna, we're not talking about a lot of movement here, so.
Well, I'm wondering if maybe we need to actually, before we finish this, is to go through each one of these sensitive sites and maybe be more specific. for that particular site,
That's
because it's kind of hard to have
Right,
one,
right.
one size fits all for
Right.
each of these sites, because they're all unique.
That's a good idea too. We just clarify each site.
Do we want to do that now?
First we read and then we go back.
Okay. So we can go back.
Okay.
Okay. So the next change at the bottom of 10 is some environmental impacts sections. First one is to clarify the visual impact, saying that basically each turbine will be designed the same, but they'll look basically the same. You can't have one that's red, one that's, different, whatever, different colors, different shapes, different designs. They need to be consistent design.
Can I just back you up?
Sure.
Looked over D here. I noticed that is basically what was also sent page 8, correct? So just repeat that.
Yeah.
The lighting.
Yeah, I mean, it's worded slightly different in that this is now their design standard versus what they were, their application, what their application needs to show, I suppose.
Well, you added the nighttime, started using impact.
Right, right,
The other part about the FAA and all that, that's still isn't the same.
right. I also, we have to change there to height. I'm sorry, I missed that. So the height limit said it's 676 feet.
Well, at the last meeting, I think the question was, should we have a height or not have a height?
Right,
And I remember saying that we should certainly have a height. And I stuck with the number that was there, but then at some moment, I think the corporate person here said that it was an extra foot. And the chairman, the supervisor said, well, then dig the hole deeper. And I remember it being said 676, and in fact, that's one of the things I'd like to come back and look at,
Sure.
height in general.
okay.
And how vigorously was height addressed in the, by the siting board?
It hasn't been. They haven't put height restrictions. As far as I know, I don't believe they put height restrictions on the towers in Casadega. If there were, it was not. It was whatever the height of the towers they were proposing.
In deposit, the news articles say that they are 600 feet high.
The towers.
Yeah, the towers with blade extended, and I'm just wondering why, since that project was just recently agreed on, why suddenly it became 650.
The
I would certainly want to lean in the direction of caution, because I get a lot of phone calls, and that's what the people are mostly concerned about, is the heights.
as far as I know, the towers being proposed in the Sanford Windsor project are the same type of towers. They're 600. They're 670. Whatever. 600. Almost 700. They're not.
I read the news
Yeah.
article this morning, and it said 600.
They're larger.
So
I think
I-
they're larger
They
than
may,
that.
they may.
Honestly.
Yeah, I'd like them to answer that question of just how much variability is there in that height. After all, we're writing a law in general, we're not writing something that is tailored to their
Sure.
particular needs.
Sure.
But I'd like to hear what they have to say about that. I mean, it may be that they're driven by maximizing profit. The higher they get, the more money, more return on their money, but we also want them to take a look at the burden that it puts on the community.
You want to? We can solicit comments from them on that. You want me? I can reach
Yes.
out.
Yeah, I would. I think they were approached informally, and they were asked if there is a plan B or how much flexibility is there in the height, and they were quite vague and said, no, they only have one plan.
Okay. Visual, so I was adding that there's a visual, added some more detail here on the visual requirements, visual impact requirements for the project, for any project that goes through this permit process. That's at the top of page 11. Oh, bottom of 10, top of 11. Next section that I changed there was the bird bat section to make it a little bit broader, use some better terminology there.
Now, is it a suggestion that we would take reference to the Delaware and Seagull Audubon Society? But what if we have other experts that want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I mean,
Is that just a suggestion that we may use them as a?
right. It's only because they exist now. That's a suggestion now. But I mean, the idea it's possible they couldn't be. They may not be around. When you get an application. So if we could leave it just so that it says input from local agencies, period, or if you want to specifically suggest DOAS as the type that you would consider being a local agency, you can
It
do that.
says you don't have to, it just says such as.
Right.
So-
So
Just
Okay.
as such
Okay.
as, that's just an example.
All
yeah,
right.
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 Timing wise, and this may be a procedural thing. This edition requires them to obtain, says any required permits, including but not limited to incidental take permits prior to the commencement of construction. I don't know if they actually could get that before they construct. I don't want to put a requirement in there that's not possible, because whoever gives that, I think it's New York State DEC that gives that permit, and I don't know if they award that until after it's constructed. So I just want to point out that we don't want to ask for something that's impossible to get. So I want to at least see if that's a possibility.
Can we put in there as per DEC something?
Yeah, we could do that too. Just say the applicant must obtain all necessary state permits.
As per specifications set
Yeah.
by Department of Environmental Conservation, New York State Department of Environmental Conservation.
Yeah, I can do that. That way it'll cover it. I added some language on open space, trying so that they have to pay attention to preserving open space if possible. Land protected by conservation easements shall be avoided when practicable. So that's something I pulled from some other laws.
We only have one conservation easement, I think, I know of in the town, which is at Guilford Lake. I don't think we have any others, but I'll look into that.
Those changes in the bottom of 11 really were just formatting changes. The section that was referring to was not a section that was applicable, so that was all that is. The next changes are on page 14 with respect to wind measurement towers, or the MET towers. Basically just restated the same setbacks for MET towers that apply to the other towers as well. So I'm going to assume that if we want to make changes to the other setbacks, that we'll make them here too. So the next, that's it for wind. The next section, this is solar. So do you want to keep pushing through this?
Why don't we, then we'll come back and take a look at the sensitive areas. Okay.
All right. We really didn't get much into solar last time, so a lot of this, these laws are structured very similar. The permit process for wind is very similar to solar, so a lot of the changes I'll go through quickly here because they're the same changes we made, we just went through in wind that made to solar as well.
So that goes to 4 too.
I'm sorry, what?
The same thing that we talked about with the FAA regulations having to do with lighting
What page you on?
on page 15.
At the bottom.
And no, it's
Oh,
on number 4.
Oh, I see.
Oh, that's, the same question.
Oh,
Yeah,
So
okay.
that-
Okay. For Met Towers, okay.
All right, so under the first page there in solar, just cleaning up these definitions to make them consistent with the wind law. That's all of these are. Same thing on page 16 with sensitive site, adding that definition in there. My assumption was that you'd want to use the same sensitive sites that are for the wind law, that you want them for solar as well. Bottom of page 16 for non-commercial solar. If you remember, there was a comment from Nan who had said that we should rely, really for non-commercial solar, we're looking for somebody on, basically on their own property for their own use. We rely upon the New York State Unified Solar Permit. So I added reference to that here. I think before it used to say a building permit, so it's now referring to the New York State Unified Solar Permit.
Which Chenango County has as part of their, okay.
But if you notice there, just real quick, it says, provided, however, that a non-commercial SCPF shall not be located on these sensitive sites. So basically, it's less about setbacks, but really it's just you can't have one on one of those sensitive site parcels.
And once again, we may get into the idea if it's a huge parcel, you can have a park or something, and you're putting solar to light someplace else in the park, and
Yeah, and I do want to point something out here on that is, and I didn't really think of this until after the fact, but this applies to schools. If the school wanted to put solar panels on its roof, this would technically be prohibiting that. So
yeah,
we may want to, I don't know, it's up to you, but I didn't think of that impact of this change. So.
Well, and there are certain standards that we've looked at when they have solar development where they may be placed on solar sites for visual impact and depending on whether it's an actual nationally registered, there are some standards for National Historic Sites what they can do as far as solar development on it.
Wouldn't some of that be that if it was solar going on in school, it would be for the school's consumption rather than broad sale?
Yeah, this is
You
applicable for non-commercial, so they'd have to
So if it's
use
non-commercial, then it would be different than commercial.
Right.
Okay.
So, I mean, if you decide you want to change that, let me know. Page 17, similar changes in the wind, I'm just clarifying what the board is actually granting here and what it means. If you get this permit, it means it's permitted. Page 18, just had a mistake there, reference turbines.
Yeah. I see on 18, you have the application fee. Is there, George, you may know the answer, is there an inspection fee also? There was some discussion about it at a county board meeting the other day. The Evans Farm has a requirement for $75,000.
That's a commercial.
It
No, it's so much per
square foot.
square
It
footage.
came out to $75,000.
That's right.
And there was a talk on that in the county 2 or 3 days ago.
And I don't think it's been determined. I think that's something that's under review.
Yeah.
Because that was under the planning department. I just read the minutes on that.
So this application fee goes to the town.
Yes,
that's
this one,
here,
yes.
And that other one goes to the
County,
county because we
yep.
don't have our own inspector.
Correct.
The next changes are on page 20. We had a pretty lengthy discussion about setbacks and buffer with solar last time. So I updated this as best I could with what I thought the consensus was here. So once again, it says no commercial solar shall be located on a sensitive site. And then there'll be setbacks from sensitive sites. So if you're going to be next to one, there's a setback of 150 feet from residential, agricultural, and sensitive site property lines. 100-foot setback from adjacent town, county, and state roads, which I think we'd want to put center line, right?
Correct.
And then 70-foot, 5-foot setback from all other adjacent property lines. You can see the buffer language there. I looked at the New York State model local law for solar, and it's not that much different from what we have here as far as language about planting trees and creating a buffer. So, you know, it's really up to you guys if you want to tweak this language here. There's
I think we're good.
options on it. Okay.
I have a real quick question, and I know this is not something we changed, but on the top of 20, where it says, located on the ground should not exceed 25 feet high at the highest lifted position, over in 17, it just said should not be higher than 20.
Where at 17?
The top, let's see here, 4.
Yeah, so where you're on page 17, that applies to non-commercial.
And this is
So
Oh, okay,
it would be, so if you had a ground mounted one in your backyard, it can't be higher than 20, and if
But
it's
this,
commercial,
because the commercial's 25.
understanding that they're probably gonna be bigger.
Yeah, all right.
So page 21. For any CPF to be constructed adjacent to a sensitive site, a map plan shall account for such sensitive areas and provide mitigation to extent reasonably necessary as determined by the board. This is somewhat of a catch-all, so let's say the property next to one of these sensitive sites is going to put a solar farm up. This leaves a little bit of flexibility as to increasing the buffer requirements and the screening. That was the concept there.
One of the things that I'm not seeing, and I have some concerns about, for projects that are that don't fall under Article 10, the town's going to become lead agency on that. And I really would like the developer somehow to be responsible if it's a commercial project for doing the seeker.
For preparing the seeker.
For preparing the seeker.
documents. Yeah, I think that they.
Because there's a lot to that. It can involve a lot of engineering and things, and I don't think that we should have to incur the costs of that if there's going to be a, and I may not have seen that and it is in here, but I don't recall that.
Yeah, so on page 18, paragraph H, one of the application requirements is a completed seeker full environmental assessment form.
Okay.
So they'll have to complete that. Now, it's always been my opinion that they submit what they think though the information needs to be in that form, but it's still up to the board to review each one, especially in the long form. There's a lot of information that goes in that, and I think despite them submitting the initial draft, you're probably still going to need to go through.
Now, will the town then still have to serve as lead agency?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they'll have to submit it, we'll have to review it, and perhaps hire some experts, consultants or something if we
I believe somewhere in here, I can't remember
Right,
where the
there's-
section, it
there's-
does say you can pass
pass the cost on
off
to.
that on to them. The next changes are on page 22.
Start with nature.
Just some cleanup changes here. Again, and then at the bottom, I made the insurance requirements consistent with the wind insurance requirements, which they weren't the same at first, so. All the way through actually this section of abandonment, the decommissioning section, I've just made it consistent with the wind.
That included a fund of money to take these things down, I don't think.
Yeah, decommissioning.
Yeah,
A
they
letter of
have
credit.
to prepare a letter of, well, they have to prepare an estimate of decommissioning, and then they have to post a letter of credit.
What is a letter of credit? If they go bankrupt, what happens then?
But it's my understanding that a letter of credit would be more secure in protecting the towns than a performance bond. That's my understanding based on reading of a couple different sources. The Casadega project, the siting board had a whole discussion on whether a performance bond should be the type of security or whether it should be a letter of credit, and they basically concluded that a letter of credit was a better option, was a more secure option.
In plain speak, is that letter of credit money that is accessible if the company goes bankrupt?
I believe so.
So
I believe
there's a
so.
place where they
I mean,
have
there's only
gold
so-
bars or something.
And the thing is, if they stop paying on it, if they've stopped paying for the letter of credit, that,
So they pay this gradually over the
I
time.
believe so. I believe so.
maybe we can look more into that. I had visions that they would
I
actually.
know for
deposit
performance
monies.
bond, they have to pay regularly. It's just like an insurance policy.
I see,
So-
okay, got it.
But there's a lot more requirements, as I understand it, to access the money for a performance bond than if it's a letter of credit, which is held by a bank versus a security company. But I can try to find some
Right,
more
Yeah.
resources.
just
on
how
this.
secure is it, how much
Just want to
risk
make
is
sure
it?
we're not
Yeah,
going to the bag.
Because, businesses get a letter of credit, and it's good for a period of time. And then,
Right.
That stuff.
yeah,
But if the business is
out.
defunct, what's their letter of credit worth?
Right,
It's-
maybe it's a Chinese business too, how will we get
I
that?
know, I got letters of credit to go buy stuff, but
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, so I'll see if I can find some resources.
a
on
little
that.
more information, please.
So, sure.
To be honest, I don't know what other options there are other than a performance bond or a letter of credit. That's all I've ever seen. Just that's the two options.
Right,
I
those are
don't-
two options.
I actually don't know which.
And I'm more familiar with bonds. I had never heard of the letter of credit until it was presented.
So that's it for the changes. Want to go back? and look
To
at
sensitive
anything?
areas, yeah.
So the first one is schools, and again, I think the idea here now is that we won't use the parcel boundary lines, but you'll define each one however narrowly you want to define it. So, for example, schools, are we talking about school buildings or the school property? That's what you have to decide.
I think we would include what is access, like playgrounds and stuff like
Right.
that.
Certainly. It's more than the building, particularly with the school. They have sports fields, they have playgrounds, they have, I would say in the case of school property.
School property.
Right. So we're really talking about the whole parcel then, for,
Yes.
for school property. Okay, so, and I may need to take each one of these, they're listed here, and pull them out as a separate number, because if we're gonna treat them differently, I may need to pull these out, so the next draft may show that, but, so let's go through each one of these. North Pond, you wanna use the water's edge as at the time,
Summer, rainy summer.
Well, once again, you have residents and things on there. The pond, of course, is sensitive, but you have residences and buildings and so forth. And, generically, when we're talking about North Pond, we have buildings, facilities, sports fields,
Right.
residences.
You've got the camp up there too.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. There's sports
Goes all
fields.
around, more so than the residents.
well, residences have their own setback, and they'll be their own parcels, so I wouldn't suggest we try to lump them in with North Pond.
But we have the camp. The camp has property, but they also have structures and fields and so forth.
That's separate here for time. That's a
Right,
separate
okay, you're right.
listing.
Okay.
What else are you gonna do besides the water's edge?
I don't
Yeah.
know.
And that probably is going to apply to all of our waters.
Water's right.
I mean, the resource is the water, it's for boating, for, fishing, for recreation, the water, so I mean, it makes the most sense, I would say.
And
So-
then you've got the buildings around, so that extends your property,
Well, in that case is
Around
where
it.
there's
So,
residents.
right.
yeah.
But it would have to be to the furthest point of the water's edge. You have the near edge, could be a near edge, you've got something here, near edge, and the far edge, people are gonna be out on the water.
True.
I don't know whether that makes any sense, or same thing with our rivers and things. It's gonna be to the far edge of not the near edge of the water. Because if people wanna be kayaking, fishing, canoeing,
Okay.
You need to say furthest edge.
No, you'd want to be the closest edge to the
Yeah.
tower, not the furthest edge. You'd want to
Furthest
be,
edge I'm thinking when I say furthest edge, I mean away from the center of the body of water,
well, if you take your,
to make it wider.
your river, and the tower's here, well, this would be your closest edge, and that would be your furthest edge.
I wasn't thinking that way. I was
Okay,
just thinking-
that's how.
Yeah, I was
that's
just
what I'm
thinking of the most expansive,
Right.
I would think the closest to the edge of
because
the.
sometimes it's gonna be wider than others.
Mhm.
So you might wanna use the most expansive edge, like how far, what's the farthest it goes away from the center.
You know, we could have a flood.
Well, I think you have to pick a defined time, like
Sure.
basically when they submit the application, whatever it is, because
There is a thing called floodway, which I had a home in a floodway and we didn't know it, but that's marked, even though the river is not there every day. Once in a while, the river goes
Well,
there.
there's floodplain, but I don't think.
Floodplain is
Yeah.
different.
Yeah, that-
Floodway is.
Floodway is what we're talking about. That is the river at its maximum, normal height.
I still think it's gotta be the water's edge.
The water's edge.
Right.
Okay, what about, Camp Missouri?
Somehow, I think both for Camp Missouri and Mount Upton Park, they're gonna be the same to wherever we have people. You know, I don't know exactly what their property looks like, but they don't use the entire property. In the park, pretty much the entire property would be used at times. And I don't know how you can write language to that effect.
Well, the Mount Upton Park would have parcel boundaries, and that would be,
Sure.
that would be
Yeah.
applicable to that.
Yes.
And then for the camp, you want to just put, any building? Any building?
Buildings, or if you're,
Or grounds, that they
parks,
use.
you know, your
Field.
fields, your play fields, or
But those would be considered facilities, and how do you say people are gonna be on those facilities to?
Campsites.
I mean, do you consider it the same as like you would treat the schools? I mean, with school, you get the whole parcel, so I don't know whether
I don't know whether they, when
developed.
they say occupy, when everything is developed, they don't,
You know, they go way beyond,
right?
way beyond what anything that they use.
So it's the grounds that they use.
Commonly used.
Facilities,
Yeah.
facilities and common use or something, built structures or facilities in use.
Right.
And that's not
And
the
again,
best
it has to
word.
be something, it has to be at the time of the application, because it wouldn't
Sure,
be fair.
sure.
Right.
It's a health information.
Okay.
For the other items that are on there, the Old Mill Restaurant, Rockdale Community Church, I really think it's the property boundaries. North Guilford Church, the Jewel Homestead.
Okay. All right, I think I've got my marching orders on these.
Okay.
Good.
And you want to carry this through to solar, I assume?
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Are there any other sections of this law we want to revisit at this point?
I think we covered most of it. What the changes were.
We're good?
Well, what I'll do then is, procedurally here, I'll try to give feedback on all the things you asked me to follow up on, like the letter credit and a few other things, and circulate those so you can consider them. Your next meeting is?
June 12th.
June 12th. So I think there's probably enough changes here where we need to reintroduce whatever that next version is, and probably,
Review it.
I don't think it's, tell me if think I'm wrong, but
Yeah, I think we're gonna have to go through this another time. We're not ready to take this to public hearing after where we've been tonight.
okay. All right,
And the documents, because we have been looking at the secret documents and stuff, and were they forwarded to the board that we got from you today? And we really can't act on that until
yeah, I mean,
we.
you could circulate them just for consideration.
Sure, we've done that, but they're really not pertinent until we have the final draft.
Right, right,
So,
right.
okay. Any questions the board has? Any more comments? Okay. Couple items. You know, I put in your packet just a quick review of, Brady, I think I left you one over there too, the Article 10 application process overview.
Yes,
This is just a timeline. I left several over on the side desk. The proposal of the High Bridge wind project, it's really a state level project is my understanding. Is that correct?
yeah,
Because the initial PIP, the Program Involvement Plan, is applied to by the state. And at this point in time, you know, everything with what was the initial process and that first line has been completed. They've already, you know, developed the final PIP. There's been opportunity for public comment on that. They have had some meetings at the town hall, the company sponsored. They have also, earlier this year, that they have done their preliminary scoping statement. That was back in January. That was, application was made to the state. There was an opportunity for the public to respond. I know we had concerns on, Bob Davis, our planning board chair, requested an extension. I requested another extension and they were granted. The public did make, a number of members of the public did make public comment on that. We are moving down. We had stipulations, negotiations with the board, which were confidential because they're legal negotiations. They have not gone anywhere. You know, we met with them for about 4 hours on the board to review things that we would not agree to, and that stuff went back to the applicant, and we haven't had a response. Moving down, we had applied for intervenor funding. The town, I think, qualified for a little bit over $9,000 in funding to cover, I should say, incidental costs that the town has. About a week ago, we had mailed, I didn't give you one of these, we had done postcards, and this isn't the actual postcard because we ran out. And I'll just note that it probably cost us a little bit north of $1,000 when we paid the bills on this. And I want to thank, we had some residents come in, Michelle came in, and Debbie came in, and Bob Davis, our planning board chair, and his wife came in to process these. And a rough estimate, it was about 31 hours total of man hours to put this stuff together. That, on my part, meant contacting different companies that could print these things, getting prices, talking to the board on that, developing a template, formatting the template, sending that to the company, editing, and then re-editing. Gail did some re-editing on it, getting things printed, and then having the volunteers come in and send that out. Really, it's just a card that if you received it, it tells you where you can find information. And we had a gentleman come in, and I apologize that there wasn't more room on here. We have things available at the town hall, most documents that you can come in and read. And if there are specific things that you would like to take, we will try to make copies if that's possible. Some of these things are bound as we have time to do that. The other locations are the Guernsey Memorial Library in Norwich, the Oxford Memorial Library, the Gilbertsville Library, and Chenango County Planning Department. Public meeting announcements have been in the Norwich Evening Sun, which is our official newspaper at the town. We're making every effort possible to get these things posted, which Gail has done a nice job on our town website. And I've been trying to get the announcements of meetings posted on our Guilford Facebook page, which at times I have to post them 3 or 4 times because they simply want you to boost the post and pay for it. And we've had a policy, we're not paying for boosted Facebook posts. So they don't always go on right away. We will have Eddie, where's Eddie? I'm going to pick on Eddie, has been coming in and doing some videotaping. we had somebody ask, were we gonna do it? I said, we're trying to, but your videotape will not be available tomorrow.
No.
No. It takes a while. He edits out when we have a regular town board meeting, some of the other things, but the one from the May 12th board meeting, am I right? No, May 8th board meeting, we did receive it, and we'll try to get that posted on our website on Friday so people can take a look at that. My understanding and discussions with Calpine is that they're planning to submit their final application, is that for me?
No.
To the state somewhere near the middle of June to the beginning of July. Once again, I have to emphasize this is a state level project. I think the board may have been misunderstood, or myself, when we were saying this is a state project. It's a private company doing this. We know that here, but it's a project that falls under what's called Article 10 at the state level. There is a part that the town plays in this, which is really what we've worked on, updating our comp plan. The purpose in that, which we have not yet taken to our second public hearing, the board has not taken action on it, which would allow us to have a renewable energy law that we've been working on, I'm going to say since January. The state, after their final application goes in, has 60 days to rule on the application and deem whether or not it's complete, or whether or not the company has to go back and make modifications in their application. There will be another period for public comment. Public comment on this is made to the state agency. It's not to the town board. I want to encourage people to, once again, we'll post it, that it's out there, how you can do that online. I realize some people are not online. If it's a real problem, I'll try to do what I can to help people out here. And if you're not online at home, I'll make the commitment to be here. But
Are the meetings of the Article 10 board open to the public?
some of the meetings I know are open. I know the intervenor hearing here was open. I'd have to go back and read through the entire Article 10 process.
And do they meet locally so people don't have to go to Albany to get to the meeting?
I can answer that. So
Sure.
whenever the siting board examiner, so the siting board is a board that doesn't do anything until the very end. There's two administrative law judges that are called examiners, and any meeting that they have with the applicant and with the parties is open to the public.
And there's a record of that. There's a
and
stenographic
right,
record.
there's a record of that. So there's not many along the process.
But there would be notice of where and when
Yes.
those meetings occur, so the audience could be encouraged, maybe not encouraged, but if they wish, they could go there.
Yes, and then there will be two formal public hearings at some point in the process after the application is
Yep.
submitted, an actual public hearing that the examiners hold on the application. So those are open to the public, and then the siting board actually meets at the very, very, very end.
And that's on the flow sheet here.
Are they nearby? I remember reading something that they were encouraged to have them nearby.
Yeah, any meeting that the examiners have with the
Will be
parties is probably going to be at this in the town hall. Now, the siting board's meeting, I don't know where that actually is, if that's in Albany or it'll be here, probably in Albany, honestly.
And the town was approached by, I guess, the law judge to submit 4 names of residents who would be willing to serve as ad hoc members of the committee. And I know Dan is here as one, volunteered to do that. Art Christensen in Mount Upton, Gordon Spratel's name has gone in, and Jordan Fleming. I don't believe anyone has heard anything back. We were to submit the names, which I did in a timely fashion, to the New York State Assembly, who will pick one person, and the New York State Senate, who picks the other. And who they pick, I don't know. We did submit resumes and other areas of interest to them. Other things that have been going on, I've kind of stopped replying to public comments on social media. We're getting inundated with things. I would say in the last month I've probably gotten 100+ emails, multiple emails sometimes that I answer, and then a day or two later I get the same email again. The answer has remained the same. One of the concerns that I have is regarding home rule. As a former teacher, I think there's an education piece that I'll throw out there for people to take a look at. Home rule I don't think is quite what some people have stated it is. This is St. John's Law Review, and I suggest that people have an opportunity to take a look at it. It's easy to find. If you type in critique of New York State home rule, You can find the document, and it's titled The Constitutional Home Rule of New York, The Ghost of Home Rule. Home rule is not, I think, what some people expect it to be. I hate to say that over time the courts have eroded home rule, that it does not allow municipalities to have as much authority as they used to. Generally speaking, and I'm simplifying this to the nth degree, when the state has areas of concern, the state can step in. It began, I think, in 1923 when New York City tried passing some rules. That's when it began. It was the case of Alder versus Deegan, and it continues on to this day. And I'm not trying to just pick out one thing, but this is the last statement in here. With the extension of the state concern doctrine, is which the courts have proposed, into areas that logically should be subject to local determination, there is reason only for gloom. That the state can step in if we pass local regulations or other actions. And I think people may be aware of that in a broader sense of what the U.S. Supreme Court does. That there's actions that are taken by states or other individuals, and they'll make a determination as to whether or not they are constitutional or legal. Okay, going back to our agenda. Got a couple other things on here just to update you, and we will get to from the floor. While we created the highway positions, we do have a person that we need to hire, and it's the intern that's working on our Cornell Rural Roads Highway Management Program. His name is Zach Fernandez. He has started work for us. He's done the training with Jeff Fuller at Cornell last week, and I'd entertain a motion to hire him for the summer intern position.
So moved.
Do I hear a second? Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That's going to carry. Our old laptop is up and running. I was hoping we could use the old laptop that the clerk had. It was reformatted. It took about a day and a half to update all of the Windows 7 on it, because I guess they had to begin from the beginning. So it is working, and he started work on that. Update on logging. I was contacted by Gransbury Logging. They don't think they're going to be able to get here as soon as they thought. They said possibly in August. Since then, we've had some discussion. I know there were some phone calls from Mike Wildenstein and Axtell Logging. I've spoken to both of them. Mike Wildenstein came out and took a look at the property, and I told him it's not fully marked yet. Mike Gray is going to let me know when he finishes marking trees. He's going to come back out. Axtell Logging, although the information the board got was that they had talked to us when I called the owner. He didn't know what I was talking about. And he said he's kind of tied up until August also. But if the trees were marked, he knew Mike Gray. He might come take a look at it and give the board some feedback. I really think we do have policy on this as far as putting things out to bid. It was a recommendation of the forester that there wasn't enough to go to bid, and I don't think there was from his estimates, but we'll get some more information on that.
So we could change that.
I think possibly I'd probably refer it to council since we've signed the contract, and the contract only had a start and finish date to be put in there, that they had 30 days from when they started. But we were under the assumption they were going to be here May, June.
Didn't they say from the beginning they wanted to do it because
Yeah.
they were the neighboring
Yeah.
property?
And they're apparently, I don't know what's going on with that. Okay, and I think that's all I have unless the board has anything else. At this point in time, we'd like to open up the meeting to from the floor. I want to review our public comment policy. We have some additional people here tonight. This policy has been adopted by the board. It's been reviewed by the open meetings law at the state level. A 30-minute public comment period will be held. It's requested that individuals or representatives or groups who wish to make a statement during public comment pick up a numbered card. They're on the side tables. Speakers will have up to 5 minutes to make their statements. In the event a group of persons supporting or opposing the same position wishes to speak, a spokesperson will be designated to express the group's concern. Speakers will be courteous in their language and presentation. If possible, it is requested but not required to be seated when speaking. Comments must be related to legitimate town business. It's requested but not required that speakers will begin by stating their name, address, and any organization they belong to. Speakers' statements will be directed to the town board as a whole and not to individual members of the audience or individual members of the board. Discussion or debate between speakers and members of the audience will not be allowed. Town board will not likely take any action and we may not respond. It is a public comment period. And I guess we'll open it to the floor. Whoever has card number 1. Card number 2. Did people pick up cards? They're still there. Card number 4. There wasn't a card 3, so somewhere that disappeared. Card number 4.
Hi, my name is Barb Reynolds. I bought the old town farm and I operate Guiford Center Storage, and Jim Blackman has Jim's Auto Repair there.
Okay, you need to speak to us.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
And I just want to say I'm pro wind farm.
Does anybody have card number 5?
My name is Bill Baisley, 133 Lower Road. And I'm all about seeing this wind farm come in. I think it'd be good for Guilford. There's nothing here now. We don't even have a store. This is a good opportunity. I think we need to take advantage of it.
Card number, is it 6?
Yes.
Card number 6.
Good evening. First, I'd like to begin by saying thank you to both the town supervisor and the town board members. This is a once-in-a-lifetime project that I know you all are doing your due diligence on. My name is Michael Dunn, and I'm here representing over 800 active and retired members of Laborers Local 785, with members that live here in Chenango County. Our members don't just live here, but they hunt, fish, and enjoy the outdoors no different than anyone else in this room. Local 785 members care about the environment and also want to work here where they live. Local workers spend their money locally, plain and simple. Now, someone might try and argue that these jobs are temporary jobs, and they'd be correct. All construction projects are temporary jobs. Yet Laborers Local 785 has over 800 members earning a living wage while receiving medical, dental, vision, and retirement benefits. Not to mention the 50 retirees collecting a pension from a career of working temporary jobs. So like I said earlier, and this is a once-in-a-lifetime project. The energy is needed, the work is needed, and the tax revenue is needed. And Laborers Local 785 is in full support of the High Bridge Wind Farm project. Thank you.
Okay. I think the other card is still over there. Is that correct? We're going to open up to the floor, and I just have to ask you, have one person go at a time. So if you'd like to speak, please raise your hand and be recognized. And we'd like to continue with public comment. Yes.
Hi, my name is Laura Bamian. I'm an attorney with Young Summer in Albany. We represent Calpine and High Bridge Wind in the state's Article 10 siting process. Just had a quick question for the board. I know it's not a conversation, but just, I guess, food for thought, and also a quick comment. I can't speak to the technical aspects of the height restriction that the gentleman on the corner of the table was referencing. I will speak with Calpine, and I'm sure Brady will send that question on to Alec Jarvis as well, who wanted to be here but wasn't able to due to some travel problems. Generally, though, we would like the board to consider that flexibility in having a height restriction that's higher than perhaps is the intended turbine allows the company to consider a range of heights of turbines, which may allow them to also reduce the impacts from turbines. So you could have fewer wind turbines by choosing the taller model. You could have lower sound impacts, lower environmental impacts, or ground disturbance. It allows for some flexibility to give Calpine the opportunity to demonstrate that they minimize their environmental impacts, looking at the whole broad range of potential impacts. So as you consider the height restriction and can consider the feasibility of that from a technical aspect, which again I'll give you more information on, I'd like you to think about the broader implications of that. The question I had for the board was a pretty simple one, whether the renewable energy law has been referred to the county planning board under general municipal law to review them, or whether it will be.
But I'll address the board because we actually talked about this. I don't believe, I will double check this before we actually take action, but I don't believe it's required because it's not, I don't consider this to be a zoning law because you don't have zoning, and we didn't cite specific zoning provisions of state law as the authority for you to take this action. So my understanding, if it's not a zoning law, then you don't have to refer it. Now, I'm saying that now, but I will double check that to be sure before you actually take action. just so you know, procedurally.
Okay. Anyone else from the floor?
I'm Michelle Hartwell, I live on High Bridge Road, and I just was wondering, at the last meeting when we reviewed through the wind law, I think I heard that the setback at that point in time was supposed to be 1.5 times for residents. And when asked about that, I think it was said that that's usually the state standard. And I think tonight I heard that it's now been lowered to 1.25.
Residents were at 1.5.
What was the 1.25 that I heard? And also, I think I would like to have heard you read through the changes. I know you read them, but there was things that we didn't understand that you were changing because it wasn't said out loud for us to be able to hear. And I'm not sure now what you have for a setback for your sensitive sites. I know that was 2 miles. And I'm wondering if these changes didn't happen because Mr. Jarvis at the end of the meeting stood up and said that all but like 4 towers for one setback and 1 tower for the other setback would be affected by those setbacks that you were talking about. So I'm wondering if you aren't tailoring it to their needs a little bit, and if you are really doing that with a clear conscience.
Okay. Setbacks to residents is still 1.5, is that correct?
It's 1.25 times the total height from the nearest non-participant boundary
Right.
property line.
That's
It's
right.
1.5 times the total height or more from the center of the road. It's 2 times the total height, or it says or more, from the nearest non-participant residence. So it's 2 times from the residence, 1.25 to the boundary property line.
Right, but that is a change from the last time, I know. I was wondering also, are some of the cemeteries, should they be considered as sensitive sites? Because we do have historical cemeteries. And I just was wondering if those shouldn't.
We have one listed.
You do have one listed?
And that's the one that's designated.
What would the cemetery up Wahlberg's Corners be?
I don't know.
Godfrey, is it Godsfrey?
It's not listed as historic.
And the other change I think I saw from the last meeting was I think that the height was set at 650 and now that height, because I think once again it was because Mr. Jarvis did say that it would be affected, is now up to 676.
No, that's under review.
So,
We're reviewing.
okay, good, that's great. All right. And I was wondering also, are we doing anything to protect like our airwave television, our cell service, those kind of things? Are the effects on that I know that
Yes.
they
That's in
can?
here.
It's in the study or
Has
the
that been
preliminary.
addressed?
Yeah, it's in here.
Shortwave radio?
It's
Is it
TV, radio, shortwave radio, microwave.
Great. Thank you.
From the floor again.
I have a question. Dan Harrington, member of
You
the
can make a comment. I don't know if we'll respond to a
She
question.
asked the question. I just have a question. What is the actual sensitive site setback distance? I don't think you answered her question. You answered her
it's right
other
here.
questions, but not that one. Is it still
It's
2
2.
miles?
It's 2 times.
It was 2 miles previously, right? That went down to 2 times. It was 2 miles, it went down to 2 times.
Once again, we can have only one person talking.
So it went from 2 miles to 1,300 feet. Am I correct there? How did that get changed so drastically? I'm just curious how that happens. Like changes that happen in between the public meetings, how do they take place amongst the members? I'm curious how that happens.
That change should have been made before. We talked about it way back when we first saw this, and it was a change that we said we didn't feel quite realistic
Yeah.
at 2 miles. And we took it down to this 2 times.
You don't feel like that's drastic to go 2 miles to 1,300 feet though?
I think it was a mistake, honestly. I don't think that may have been, because when we went through that, everybody said, wait, no, that's not what we had said. I think that, so I must have misunderstood because 2 miles is not what, everybody was unanimously agreeing that that was not what they had asked me to do. So that must have been a mistake on my part. So that was it, and also that was discussed at the last board meeting. That wasn't in between. I think the last board meeting we talked about it shouldn't be 2 miles. That was in the public meeting, I believe.
Gary?
Yes, my name is Gary Marcus. I live on the Guiford Smith Road. I'd like to remind everybody that the board especially, that we, the Guilford residents, elected you to protect our safety and our personal interests, not favor Calpine, okay? Their needs, their greed, whatever. They did their study for years and years, and this is being pushed on us in months. And I think the board needs to provide the time to really research the effects of the other projects of this magnitude, whatever their imperfections are, and the detriments to their performances in areas all throughout the state at a very minimum. And many, many questions that need to be addressed. Right? And it's our town board's responsibility. I read this, okay? Town board's responsibility to form an objective and unbiased and comprehensive assessment of all impacts and costs, health effects especially, for both the people and for the animals, wildlife. And this type of assessment, I don't know. I don't see that's really being followed through on. That's my opinion.
I'm going to briefly share. I know we've had some residents, and we are reviewing. Rebecca sent us some stuff. I've been in the process of trying to go through it. It's timely. I appreciate it. It was a lot of work, and the board, I think, received that also. I've been looking at all your citations and so forth, having some trouble with them. So, okay. The other thing that we had done, it was suggested previously to the board that we want to take a look at the World Health Organization guidelines. I printed those. I sent them out to the board members for them to review. I actually also read the study that was from those guidelines, which is like 70 or 80 pages long. There was some detail in there I struggled with a little bit. My scientific background was not that great. And the study that was conducted to develop the guidelines, wind turbine noise guidelines, but by the World Health Organization, did not consider many other studies. They didn't consider studies that were anecdotal, that were basically, this is my observation. They did not include studies that did not include sound and distance from the turbines. There were some that were just distance, and these were effects. And they did not include studies, health studies, that did not have any pre-existing condition assessments. What the people's health like prior to this. And I'm going to be very generic as I generalize. One of the things I think that is in there is that more study is necessary. There is correlation in some areas, and that the data on health effects related to this, some of the data is of poor quality. That's not to dismiss any of these other studies. I know I've been spending hours, and the board has spent, well, you think we're not, we're trying to weed through these things, and there's a lot of stuff that's out there. I think I got better at looking at some of those things this afternoon. Okay, from the floor, other comments? Yes.
Linda McNerney, Gospelville. These may be things that are already in what you were talking about that we didn't actually hear, so just a couple comments. Your thing about the mediation, if a customer in person had a complaint and they would have to bring in a mediator to solve that, and does it say who pays for that mediation so that it's us? That's one thing. The comment about the land for Camp Missouri up on North Pond. Camp Missouri has been there a long time. That camp should have the right to develop, and I think it should be the parcel boundary limits, not whatever they're currently using. They should have the right to keep developing their camp however they want, and it shouldn't impact where the towers were put. And the conservation district, I think your comment said something about if practical. Any company can say something's not practical. I don't like that wording personally.
Camp Missouri has come in and had discussions with me. I will say I know their position, they do not want to be political. They said this is a political thing, they do not want to be involved in that. I think their position is clear. They've also had communications with the company regarding on what their position will be. And other than that, I don't want to be speaking for
Well,
them.
further comment, that camp could sell tomorrow and it could belong to somebody else,
Sure.
but there's still children that will be on that
Yes,
property.
yes. Anything else from the floor? Yes.
Leslie Ford, Marble Road. I just wondered if there was anything in this about water runoff. It seems to me, there's a lot being changed down the hill. When snow melts or we get a lot of rain, a lot of people or roads could be affected. And I haven't heard anything mentioned.
And I want to apologize. I know you sent me an email on that. I've been trying to investigate some things. Generally, when you have issues dealing with water, for example, when we did the town project here, we had to do the seeker, the state environmental quality review, and you have to have a plan to mitigate those things. In our case, we hired an engineer to do those things. The Article 10, and I have to emphasize, I'm hearing that this is not a state project. This is a state level project that is being overseen by the state, not by the town of Guilford. The Article 10 process kind of, I don't know whether it sidesteps the seeker process, but they do those kinds of review dealing with runoff and things because the DEC is part of the group that's sitting on the state siting board. So they will review those things at that level. I'm not trying to be evasive here. It's not something, we could put something in the town law, but the state is going to, I guess.
Yeah, we have sections in the application requirements for, to assess soil runoff. Where is it?
Included in that plan, 7.
Yeah, a report showing soil logs, soil profile analysis, stormwater runoff calculations for the area being disturbed, plans to prevent pollution of surface and groundwater, erosion of soil. So there's a section on that for their application requirement. But DEC has I've gone through this process. They have a team of people who are working for DEC to evaluate the stormwater runoff. There's a SWIP involved. It's a stormwater management plan that they have to comply with. So that's an environmental review that's entirely handled by the state. We have absolutely no jurisdiction to influence their stormwater management plan. We can simply say that they need to address it, and the impact this local law has on the state process is that they have the option to enforce this law to the extent they consider it not unduly burdensome on the applicant. So it's a bizarre standard. It's not directly applicable to them. The siting board has the ability to decide whether our standards are overly burdensome or not. If they're not overly burdensome, they will apply them. So that's basically the standard here that this is within the Article 10 process. It's not directly applicable. The siting board can choose to apply it. It's not overly burdensome. So you have to walk a fine line of not being so burdensome that you know they're not going to apply it at all versus putting something in there that will be considered not overly burdensome. So that's just so everybody understands the characterization of this law.
Hey, Bill.
Actually 3 now. I'm a little bit confused by what the attorney's talking about here. There's many cited cases for projects that have gone through Article 10 that have much more stringent setback requirements, sound requirements, all of these parameters that you're looking at. And the state has not overruled them. There's some that are much more stringent than what we're talking about. It looks to me like you're going on the minimum criteria rather than looking at the maximum criteria. That's just my first comment. The other thing is, when you're talking about setbacks and you're wrestling with the word structure and all of this, is a lot of other jurisdictions have been using the term residence. My issue is that you seem to be avoiding using the setback limit to a property line for non-participating residential properties. Now, my big concern is, and I heard somebody mention it just now, the right to develop. I think you were referring to that with Camp Missouri, all right? That doesn't an individual that owns a piece of property have that same right to develop that property anywhere on their property as long as they abide by the building code. If they do, then if you allow, or if you write a law that's written to being a structure, a residence, or anything other than property lines, on many of these properties that are in that area, long and narrow properties, you're going to limit and basically restrict that person from ever being able to build on that property. Because at that point, they're going to be subjecting themselves to unnecessary conditions. So I'm not quite sure why the board is so reluctant to look at property boundaries.
We do have that. We do have that. It's 1.25 times the total height or more from the nearest non-participant boundary property line. So that is in there.
Okay, so that leads me to my final thing is the board gonna release a draft version of the entire law so that, I mean, we can't, I'm trying to sit here and figure out what you guys are talking about changing, and I've never seen the original.
Phil, I'm gonna say yes, you've emailed me 3 times, I've given you the response, which is gonna be the same as what I'm gonna tell you tonight. At which point in time that we've finished with our work as far as we've gone, and the board is proposing to take it to public hearing, they'll be available. This is still at our end a work in progress. We've made a lot of changes in this. And I understand you wanna actually read the documents, but there's things that we discuss that sometimes don't come out exactly how we would intend them to do. It's a work in progress. I believe, and that's a standard. You know, you'll get a copy of this, the public will get a copy of this when we are ready to take it to public hearing. We're not ready to do that yet. You know, we're probably gonna have another sit down, like we did tonight, read through this thing, do some more tweaks, and get the final verbiage done. And Brady has some things we're asking him to check on. Ken has some things we want researched further. And when it's ready to go, it will be available on our town website. Copies will be available here for review for you to come in and take a look at.
At the public hearing, do we expect then there to be a time period after that before we vote on the law?
There could be. There could be. I'm not gonna say there will be, but there could be. You know, we had a public hearing initially on our comp plan. We'll do another public hearing, and the board will then make a decision when we're ready to adopt or not adopt.
George, will there be a time frame prior to the public hearing that will be available?
Yes, that's a
There
requirement.
needs to be.
Okay, so there's,
I think it's 10 days it
Yeah.
has to be available.
so it will be available 10 days before.
And we'll do public notice on that. I said we'll get it on our website. There has to be legal notice in the newspaper. We count our days to make sure we're there. So, yes.
Dwayne Reed from Marble Road. I wanted to ask the board as a whole this question, and it's common knowledge that the data that's available to us is based on wind turbines that are 300 to 400 feet or so in that ballpark. That's the bulk of the data. But now we're talking about 650 foot, now 676 foot, and now Calpine, Highbridge wants the option to go higher. These changes are significant, and all the data out there is blown out the window, and it leapfrogs into a significantly more extreme category: sound, environmental issues, et cetera, et cetera. I want to know from the board, do you guys feel comfortable with us as guinea pigs? I would suspect, being that we're in this category of huge turbines now, that we err on the side of caution and not go somewhere down the road. Oops. That's all I need to know. Do you guys feel comfortable with that?
I wouldn't call it erring on the side of caution. I would say leaning in the side of caution, because maybe it is not an error when you're being cautious.
I agree.
So we say leaning in the direction of caution.
Yes.
Yeah, Joe. I have
I'm a little confused here, I guess, it's not a, it's now a state project, not a private project.
It is a private project that's being overseen by the state. The application for this project is going to New York State. And they are, the siting board is gonna oversee this project and make final determinations on it. It's a private company doing the work.
But they weren't hired by the state?
No. Anything else from the floor? Yes.
It's a private project being overseen by the state, but the authority that the local board has is right now with the wind law. You know, unless you say 20 miles from a residence and 0 sound, they're not going to ignore the wind law. You have a lot of authority. And that's where that statement comes from, George. You like to say it's a state project, and you've shut multiple people down with that statement. And the first time I talked to you about it, when I paid my taxes here, that's the last thing you said to me, and you walked away from me. It's a state project.
And once again,
I
comments to the
just
board.
want people to know that you do have authority. This is important. 2 times the tip height is 1,300 feet from a house that doesn't want these near them. That's unsafe. It's not safe. If you go to our website, saveguilford.com, you can see a graphic of what that looks like. To scale a house to a 650 foot, now they want higher, what that's going to look like to a 2-story home, it's going to devastate those people. And these are the people that you, under the New York State Constitution, have sworn to protect. Every time Calpine requests something, they get it. We're screaming at you, asking you to protect our health and our property, and you give it to Calpine. And that's where the frustration comes from. I say shame on this wind law. I don't agree with it. And when these people are feeling the effects, it's right here. It's not the state, George. It's right here. And I want everybody to remember that. And that's where we're coming from. We care about our residents.
We voted for you people to protect us.
We're asking for reasonable setbacks so we're safe. That's it. We can't even comprehend the size of these turbines. It's mind-boggling. And you're putting them way too close to homes. You are. 1,300 feet for a 650-foot plus turbine? It's unsafe. It's absolutely unsafe. And that's where I stand.
Somebody in the back.
My name is Kate DeFlumer. I live at 652 Philadelphia. I've been here less than a year in this community. I hear that this is all supposed to bring good things to this community. Had the people that I purchased the home from been honest, told me these were coming in because they leased their property, I would not have purchased here. So if this is going to be so good for this community, you're going to lose people living here, not gaining more people. All based on dishonesty.
Anything else from the floor? Yes.
Why do these turbines have to be this high? You go to Canastota, you go to Munnsville, 250, 350 feet. Is it? Why do these gotta be so high?
The explanation we were given is that we're not in a prime wind area, and that the taller turbines capture.
Move them somewhere else.
Again, we need to have quiet. Anything else from the floor? I have one item that's not on the agenda. I'd like to propose that we schedule a second public hearing for June 12th on our comprehensive plan. We have not made any changes in the plan. I know there were some suggestions. I've had discussions with the board. It is a generalized plan for the town, and I'd like to schedule that at 7 o'clock if the board agrees to that. Make a motion on June 12th. Motion is made to schedule a second public hearing on the proposed update to the comprehensive plan for 7 p.m. June 12th.
Sorry.
Motion's made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That's gonna carry. Okay, other than that, we do have some executive session business for tonight.
What's the reason we don't?
We haven't, threat litigation. I know I would throw my flag in the air.
I'd like to get you some lunch, because I only had some nice ones that said, yeah.
A little bit.
I'll tell Tom to grab one.